here in Rostrevor, overlooking Carlingford Lough. So join me on a wee adventure here. Who really knows what we're walking on here? The history we're walking on? So this history can be contentious, it can be controversial. You know, some will see this as an obvious colonial memorial. And the questions do have to be asked, you know, where is Rory McGuinness's castle? It may not be in this location, but you look out here, you think to yourself, it certainly does look like it's a fine location to build a castle. And I've seen these lands and read Patrick Murphy's book about the history of Rostrevor, and I've seen this giant rath that exists just above this tree line into that field. So the evidence is in front of our faces. Erected by the inhabitants of the County Down and by the Army serving in America in remembrance of Major General Robert Ross, as a tribute to his private worth and a record of his military exploits. 1826. To the ancient rath. There's been a great debate for many years about where Rory McGuinness's castle stood, which they reckon was the older name for Rostrevor, Castle Rory. So there was an old map that showed around these grounds there was a site of ruins. But these ruins can't be found anymore, so when you see the view that this site has out to the sea, you really do feel like it's a prime location to have a castle or to build a rath, looking right out to the bay with the mountains on either side. No mention of the history anymore of Rory McGuinness's castle. And these lands all around here were old McGuinness clan lands. And in the 1640s, when these lands were taken off the clans, the benefactors of those lands, the people that were given these lands, were people like the Rosses, which this giant Egyptian obelisk is in honour to. So I'll just read you a little bit about General Robert Ross now. So Ross was made a general and sent to North America, where he took command of a British force designated to attack the United States capital of Washington DC during the War of 1812. Ross's professional soldiers quickly defeated a poorly organised American militia, but at the Battle of Bladensburg on August 24th, and that evening proceeded to enter Washington. The British Army burned many important US government buildings, including the White House and the Capitol, demoralising and greatly damaging the American war effort. Ross then led a British invasion north up the Chesapeake Bay towards the city of Baltimore, which culminated in the Battle of Baltimore that September. On September 12th, he was shot while commanding troops at North Point and died while being moved to the rear. He's commemorated by this almost 100-foot granite obelisk near the shoreline of Carlingford Lough in the Ross home village of Rostrevor, County Down, as well as by a monument in St Paul's Cathedral in London, England. So the history here, again, very fascinating, very interesting. This is one of the most unusual things I've seen in the landscape. You tell me who's expecting to find an almost 100-foot granite Egyptian obelisk in the Irish countryside, dedicated to a man who supposedly helped burn down the White House. So as I look out to the majestic Carlingford Lough over to Sleep Martin, I just think to myself, look where I am standing. Amongst this 100-foot granite monument. It almost doesn't make sense. History. I love asking questions, and for me, even just getting to see a giant obelisk is something that I would expect to see in Egypt, one of the natural wonders of the world, or one of the ancient wonders of the world. But here I am in little old Ireland, County Down, in McGuinness Clanland. Just want to read you a bit more history about this Ross monument here. It's very interesting. So, the Star Spangled Banner. General Robert Ross is famous for burning down the White House and indirectly inspiring the American national anthem. Born in Rostrevor in 1776, Ross was a childhood friend of the Duke of Wellington and served under the Iron Duke in the Peninsular War. He was sent to America at the head of over 4,000 of Wellington's invincibles during the War of 1812. Ross routed American forces at the Battle of Bladensburg on August 24th, 1814, nearly capturing President Madison in the process before marching his troops to Washington. There, having had his horse shot from beneath him, he burned the president's house, the precursor of the White House, supposedly after first finishing the recently departed Madison's breakfast. So infuriated were the Americans, it is believed they considered torching Rostrevor, this beautiful village here, in revenge. Just before the British assault of Baltimore, where General Ross was killed, lawyer Francis Scott Key met Ross to request that he release an American prisoner, Dr. Beans. During the night, Key witnessed the terrifying British bombardment of Fort McHenry. On seeing the American flag still flying high at dawn, he was inspired to write the words of the Star Spangled Banner, which became the American national anthem in 1931. This monument stands on the ground where General Ross had planned to build his retirement home had he returned safely from America. He is buried in Halifax, Nova Scotia. From the steps at the rear of the monument you can see Rostrevor's house, the home of his widow, which for a time was also known as Bladensburg House. So could be that little house there. That's some magnificent history for you folks there. So you can imagine a naval fleet of American ships sailing into Carlingford Lough here. That would have been some sight. Legendary stories of the Carlingford Lough district. The land of Cooley and the Tyne lie between Greenore and the Irish Sea, west to east, and spreads north to south from the shores of Carlingford Lough to the waters of Dundalk Bay, thus forming a peninsula in the centre of which rises the Cooley Sleeves. In old times it contained much more territory than it does at the present time. It included the whole Carlingford range of mountains up to Omeath and was called the mountainous peninsula of Cooley, lying between Lough Carlin, Carlingford Lough, Lough Delgan, Dundalk Bay and Muirmannanan, Irish Sea. Cooley takes its name from Culgna Cooley, son of Brehan, uncle of Milesius, who invaded Ireland from the east 283 years after Pharaoh Singaris, king of Egypt, perished in the Red Sea about 1300 years before the birth of Christ. Cooley may be called the birthplace of Gaelic literature. Here the scene is laid of the oldest and grandest epic poem in ancient language of Ireland. The famous Tambo Cooley, the cattle spoil of Cooley, which is transcribed in that precious manuscript known as the Book of the Duncow. It belongs to the Red Branch cycle of the Irish Gaelic sagas, and its hero is the world-renowned Cuchulainn, the Achilles of the Irish Gaels. The time is a little before the birth of Christ. And I myself remember as a boy getting books about Cuchulainn and the Red Branch Knights, Setanta and the Red Branch Knights of Ulster, and the Fianna, the ancient Irish warriors. They were absolutely amazing tales. So over those mountains, I'm just looking out to the land of all those myths and all those stories. A lot of them which I believe are true, now turned into mythology. For me, are oldest historical references of stories that may be true. So yeah, this is a fantastic book by Michael Crawford, Legendary Stories of the Carlingford Lough District. I love reading books when I'm in the actual area that I'm in. It just adds that special bit of mystique to the whole thing. So. Just took off into the hills there in the bag. It's very addictive. You cycle up one hill and then you go up another, and then you find yourself up in beautiful places like this. So I don't know when I'll stop, but you'll see me somewhere, folks. In amongst the hedgerows anyway. On the way home now, lads.